First, there was definitely a message of be kind to yourself. There is no judgment in feeling low. Stop judging yourself for feeling low. Energy does not have a moral value. I can feel myself tearing up just thinking about these thoughts, that I would put a moral value on feeling poorly, feeling low, or not having energy. I was judging myself for that. And I don't know if you can relate to that feeling. Welcome to the Blueprint Breakers podcast. What is a blueprint breaker? If you live your life outside the typical traditional lifestyle blueprint, you are a blueprint breaker. We are here to start a conversation, to assemble resources, and to build a community. This podcast is for empowered women in midlife and beyond who are preparing for a powerful next era of life. My name is Amy A. Palmer. I am your host and facilitator for our conversations. Sit back, relax, enjoy the show. To stay connected, up to date, and to receive all of our free resources and gifts along the way, join us at community.blueprintbreakers.com. I am calling today's episode Bouncing Back, because that is what I'm doing right now. That is where I am at currently, bouncing back. I suffered a setback this week, emotionally, mentally, physically. Just had a rough week. It happens, right? So basically what happened is the end of August, I left my last location as a nomadic entrepreneur, a traveling digital nomad. I concluded a month spent in the country. I rented a small little farmhouse duplex for the month and had a very fabulous time in a beautiful part of my home state that I was previously unfamiliar with. And I felt very at peace. I felt creative, rested. I moved a lot, meaning exercise, movement. I explored the area, saw a lot of new things, connected with people that I love, got a lot of work done. It was a really, really, really wonderful month. And I'm now in transition where I have a few weeks of traveling. I've got some upcoming events coming. I've got some people to visit, places to visit. So I'm on the move again for the next several weeks. But for this week, for the first week and a half-ish of September, I am in one place, and I had big, big plans for the week. Before I left the country, I wrote out a very clear, detailed, ambitious, yet what I considered inspiring plan on what I wanted to do and how I wanted to get things done. And my vision for my business, for myself, for my life, had a lot of stuff planned out. And once I actually got to this latest location, I found myself deeply unmotivated and tired and even a little weepy and emotional. If I was younger, I would say that it felt like PMS, but that's definitely was not the cause, but I felt myself slipping for sure. Now, this past 15 months, I've been strengthening my toolbox for self-development, self-care, for managing times when I'm not feeling my best, and to just sort of evolve as a person, as a human, and expand into, everything that I want to become. And so I really feel like I've strengthened my toolbox and I've sharpened a lot of my skills. And what has been in my toolbox is movement, keeping my body moving, walking, swimming, kayaking, stretching, yoga, all of those things have been very, very key. Nature, being out in nature, experiencing nature, sunshine, greenness, water, whether through walking or just sitting and being surrounded in it. Looking at art and experiencing art in various forms is also a key element of my toolbox. Music, listening, dancing, and especially singing, although I only do that in private, it still is a very, very valuable tool for me in my toolbox. Listening to inspiring podcasts or watching them on video, people who I admire, people who sort of just inspire me, is very, very helpful. And then sometimes journaling. It doesn't always work for me. I'm not always in the mood to do it, but there are definitely times where journaling has been extremely helpful. But this past week, what happens when the funk or the fog doesn't let you, quote, let you access your toolbox? What then? That's where I was. I didn't feel like doing any of those things. I didn't feel like accessing any of those things in my toolbox. So I can tell you what I did. Well, first what I did is I spent a few days feeling really, really guilty, really beating myself up, really shaming myself, lots of negative self-talk. Wow, what a loser you are. I thought you learned on, how to handle these things, and you have all these plans and you can't even get it going, and what an imposter, all the bad things, all the negative talk. My eating plan went pretty much out the window. The health plan that I had been following, I was temporarily just not, I was still thinking about it, but not taking the actions that I have been consistently taking for 15 months. And I could feel myself really, really spiral in my head. I could feel, and I started to be afraid that I would, go to a place where I've been before where I don't really want to be. Now, I do need to make a special note here, a note to self and a note to my fellow blueprint breakers who are my particular flavor of blueprint breakers, the solo supremes out there, those of you without a partner, without a family. I cannot speak to what it's like to be in a funk when you have a family and to feel yourself spiral when you have a group of people who are depending on you. I can't speak to that. I can speak to how it hits when you are a solo adult like myself. I feel like it hits different for us. And the reason why I think that it hits different is because I do know that when I have someone or something external that needs me for some reason, that when I'm in a funk, when that happens, I can still manage to step up for other people. I don't know why that is, and it's really too bad, but that's how I'm wired. I don't know if you can relate. So it does help to have connections with other people or other people who are depending on you or making a commitment to other people when you're in that funk. But if there's no external motivators and you don't have those connections to somebody else, then you're relying on yourself. So I was relying on myself when I was going through this a little over a week ago. And it's very difficult. I find it much more difficult for whatever reason to keep a commitment to myself, step up for myself sometimes, than keeping a commitment to somebody else and stepping up for them. That's just the sad reality of it. And I will continue to work on that piece. All right. So getting back to, so what do I do? And, I was not feeling in a good place. Well, first, I really needed to understand why for me. And again, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I remember I had a situation in therapy years ago when my therapist said something along the lines of, you don't have to unravel all the whys for everything. You don't have to understand where it all came from. That's not always necessary. But in this case, it was necessary for me. I really needed to understand what was happening and what was causing this emotional dip. I think it was important for me to understand as part of my learning. And for me, the conclusion that I came to, and I came to this conclusion just by sitting still and thinking about it, meditating on it. It all comes down to space and place. And I've started to think of those two words capitalized, capital S for space, a capital P for place, because I'm realizing that those are very, very, very important elements for me. I had just spent a month creating and designing my own space and place to experience the day and to go through my life in that month. And and felt really rejuvenated and fulfilled, and it was feeding me, and like I felt in a really, really good place. So leaving there and going back to uncertainty and movement, and I'm still enjoying this nomadic lifestyle. So don't get me wrong. I love moving around from place to place and seeing people who I care deeply about. I love that. And at the same time, I'm realizing that there's an adjustment period as I make those transitions, and that different spaces and different places affect me differently. And there's certain elements of place. I shared this with my mentor, Glow, and she said she could relate, that she learned early in her nomadic life that she did best if she was in wide open spaces with white walls. That was like an element that was conducive to creativity and productivity for her. And that if she was in smaller spaces or had colors on the walls or darker walls or anything like that, it had a different effect on her. I found that very interesting. And that was something that she figured out for herself. And so I've been starting to sort of assess and figure out, okay, what do I need in my place? What do I need in my space? So I got to the why, which was fabulous. And just knowing that I was grieving the loss of my previous space. And it's okay. It's always okay to grieve. That's, there's no shame in that. So where do I go from here? I'm feeling in a funk. I'm feeling in a fog. Nothing that I wanted to have happen this first week was happening. What do I do next? So this is what I did. I got quiet and still, and I asked myself, or I asked my higher power, or I asked the best version of Amy, I asked, what can I do? How can I pull myself out? How can I get back into motion of where I was before? If I had been feeling better, I would have done this in my journal, but I didn't even feel like journaling. I didn't even feel like going and getting my journal. I didn't feel like writing. So I just sat quietly with my thoughts as I thought to myself, what can I do? What's next? How do I turn this around? I got really, really quiet and just let my thoughts flow. And here's what came to me. First, there was definitely a message of be kind to yourself. There is no judgment in feeling low. Stop judging yourself for feeling low. Energy does not have a moral value. I can feel myself tearing up just thinking about these thoughts, that I would put a moral value on feeling poorly, feeling low, or not having energy. I was judging myself for that. And I don't know if you can relate to that feeling. So these were just some of the thoughts that were coming. I also had a very clear thought and direction, because the best version of myself is she's spot on. She said to me, give yourself whatever time you need. How long do you want to rest? How long do you want to sit with these feelings? How long do you need? So she was asking me back. It's quite, okay, you're going to think I'm crazy, but these are thoughts that were flowing in my head. And so as I thought about that, I gave myself 3 days. 3 days is what I wanted. 3 more days from the time that I got still and had these thoughts. So I gave myself 3 days of zero expectation outside of what is absolutely necessary. I spent 3 days feeling sad. I spent 3 days watching movies, doing just what absolutely had to be done, eating whatever food I felt like eating whenever I felt like eating, sleeping whenever I felt like it, and letting go of any guilt around any of it. I went through those 3 days. I did still feel some guilt. I'm not going to tell you I did feel some guilt, but I very quickly would just tell myself, let it go. It's okay. You've got 3 days. So I did that for 3 days. And then after the 3 days, my promise to myself was, and this, I thought about this before I gave myself permission for the 3 days. The promise to myself was, when the 3 days was up, I was just going to pull out one tool from my toolbox each day, just one. It could be any of them. I mean, it could be getting outside. It could be going for a walk. It could be listening to some music and dancing around the house. One thing. And I was going to commit to one action or task that I had on my action plan of what I wanted to get done. And then I was also going to phone a friend and tell them how I was feeling and how I wanted to feel. So it was 3 commitments that I made to myself. Once I gave permission for those 3 days, after the 3 days, pull out one tool from my toolbox, one a day, get one thing done, one a day, and phone a friend and let them know how you're feeling. And guess what? It worked. Step by step, day by day, it's like I'm revving up my engines. I'm adding fuel. I'm getting back to my full self, back to where I felt like I was at my peak. It's been 4 days since my 3-day allowed funk concluded. It hasn't been a quick leap. It hasn't been a quantum leap. It's been a slow, steady climb back to my full self, step by step. And it's a mental thing. I feel different and I feel better. I'm looking forward to the week ahead and whatever it might bring. I have decided that I will embrace the baby steps and let go of expectations of quantum leaps. Step by step by step, I'm going to embrace this week and each day. The joy is in the journey, right? So thank you. Hopefully you can relate to this on some level. If you've ever been in a funk, I would love to hear from you about anything that you do to pull yourself out. Thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for sharing this episode with anyone who you think may benefit. Thank you for going in and giving this podcast your 5-star review. I do need to add my quick little disclaimer. I'm not a doctor or a therapist. I am just sharing my experience You need to take what I'm sharing and figure out what works for you. And I invite you to use this as a launching point to figure out your best path forward. And lastly, I invite you to join our community, community.blueprintbreakers.com. Signing up there, and you will be kept in the loop on everything that happens here at Blueprint Breakers. I have some upcoming workshops that I will be sharing with the community. So again, join us at community.blueprintbreakers.com. Have a great day. Keep on breaking those blueprints and writing your own.